The Sunday dinner table was set with Mom's finest china, the kind she only brought out when she wanted to remind everyone of the family hierarchy. My sister Victoria sat at the head of the table, her new diamond bracelet catching the light with every dramatic gesture. Her husband Marcus nodded along to everything she said, and their 2 children sat perfectly still in their seats. My son Ethan sat beside me, his journal open in front of him, pen moving steadily across the page. He was 12 years old, quiet, and had always preferred books to people. "So, how's school going for Ethan?" Victoria asked, her voice dripping with false concern. She already knew the answer. She'd made it her mission to know everything about my life so she could pick it apart at family gatherings. "It's going well," I said simply, cutting into my chicken. "Really?" Victoria's eyebrow arched. "Because I spoke to Principal Henderson at the charity auction last week. She mentioned Ethan's reading scores are still below grade level." The table went quiet. Mom set down her fork. Dad stopped chewing. My brother James looked uncomfortable but said nothing. "He's making progress," I said calmly. "Progress?" Victoria laughed, sharp and cutting. "He's 12 years old and reads like he's 8. Don't you think that's concerning?" Ethan's pen kept moving. He didn't look up. "Every child develops at their own pace," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "That's what parents say when they're in denial." Victoria leaned back in her chair, enjoying herself now. She took a slow sip of wine, letting the moment hang in the air. "Marcus, didn't you tell me about that learning center downtown? The one for children with special needs?" Marcus cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable with being pulled into the conversation. "Well, yes, there's a facility that specializes in developmental delays and learning disabilities. They have good success rates with—" "He doesn't need a special facility," I interrupted, my tone firm but controlled. "Clearly he needs something." Victoria gestured at Ethan with her wine glass. "Look at him. Even now, he's scribbling in that journal instead of participating in family conversation. It's not normal." "He's fine," I said. "He can't even read at grade level," Victoria said, her voice rising. "How is that fine?" Mom reached over and touched my arm. "Honey, maybe Victoria has a point. There are resources available. Good programs that could help Ethan catch up to his peers." "He doesn't need to catch up." "Yes, he does." Victoria's voice was sharp now, cutting through any pretense of concern. "Face reality. Your son is struggling and you're too proud to get him the help he needs." James finally spoke up. "Victoria, maybe we should—" "No." She cut him off. "Someone needs to say it. She's been making excuses for years. First it was he's shy, then it was he's creative, now it's he develops at his own pace. When does she admit there's actually a problem?" I looked at Ethan. His hand had stopped moving. The pen was still hovering above the page. But he wasn't looking at any of us. His eyes were distant, focused on something none of them could see. "Ethan reads just fine," I said quietly. "The principal said." "I know what the principal said." Victoria smiled, triumphant. "So you admit it. He's behind. He reads different material than what they test for in school." "Oh, please." Victoria rolled her eyes. "What's he reading? Picture books?" "No." "Comic books?" "No." "Then what?" She leaned forward, her smile vicious now. "Enlighten us. What is your special little boy reading that's so advanced the school can't measure it?" I set down my fork. "He's not reading. He's writing." The table went silent again, but this time the quality of the silence was different. "Sharper." "Writing," Victoria repeated, her tone mocking. "Writing what?" "Little stories." "Something like that." "How adorable." She looked around the table, inviting everyone to share in her amusement. "The boy who can't read at grade level is going to be a writer." Dad chuckled. Mom pressed her lips together but didn't disagree. Marcus looked away. "You're encouraging this?" Victoria asked. "Instead of getting him proper help, you're letting him waste time writing?" "It's not a waste of time." "It absolutely is." Victoria's voice was hard now. "He needs to focus on fundamentals. Reading comprehension. Vocabulary. Basic skills. Not fantasy nonsense in a journal." Ethan closed his journal carefully. His movements were precise, controlled. He looked at his grandmother. "May I be excused?" he asked quietly. Mom's face softened. Of course, sweetheart. You don't need to sit through this. Ethan stood, picked up his journal and walked toward the living room. I watched him go, watched the careful way he held himself, the dignity in his small frame. See. Victoria gestured at his retreating back. He can't even handle a simple family conversation. How's he going to handle the real world? He handles more than you know. Does he? Victoria leaned forward. Because from where I'm sitting, you've got a 12-year-old who can't read properly, can't socialize normally, and spends all his time in a fantasy world. That's not handling things. That's avoidance. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. I'm serious, Victoria continued. You need to wake up. Stop enabling him. Stop making excuses. Get him tested. Get him into a program. Do something productive instead of letting him pretend he's going to be some kind of writer. The phone buzzed again. And again. Aren't you going to get that? Mom asked. I pulled out my phone. 3 missed calls from a New York number. 2 text messages. I opened the first one. Everything okay? James asked. I read the message. Then I read it again. What is it? Mom's voice was concerned now. I stood up from the table. Excuse me for a moment. I walked to the living room where Ethan sat on the couch, journal open again, pen moving. I sat down beside him. Ethan, I said quietly. Did you submit your manuscript? He looked up at me. You said I should send it when I was ready. I did say that. I was ready. I looked at my phone again. The text message was clear. This is Jennifer Chen from Milestone Publishing. We received Ethan's manuscript. We need to speak with you immediately. Please call as soon as possible. How long ago did you send it? I asked. 3 months ago. 3 months. You were stressed about work. I didn't want to add pressure. I stared at him. 12 years old and already protecting me. The phone rang. I answered it. Hello. Is this Ethan's mother? The woman's voice was professional, clipped with New York efficiency. Yes, this is she. This is Jennifer Chen, senior editor at Milestone Publishing. I've been trying to reach you regarding Ethan's manuscript. I apologize for the multiple calls, but this is somewhat urgent. Behind me I heard footsteps. Victoria had followed me into the living room, her curiosity getting the better of her irritation. What's going on? She asked, her voice still carrying that edge of superiority. I held up a hand, listening intently to Jennifer's words. We'd like to offer Ethan a 3-book contract, Jennifer said. His manuscript is extraordinary. We haven't seen anything like it from an author his age. Actually, we haven't seen anything like it from any author in years. Victoria moved closer, trying to hear. The advance we're proposing is $2 million, Jennifer continued. $1 million for the first book, $500,000 each for the second and third. We'll discuss specifics, but I wanted to reach you today because we already have interest from film studios. Warner Brothers called this morning. I couldn't speak. Hello. Jennifer's voice sharpened. Are you still there? Yes, I managed. I'm here. We'd like to schedule a meeting in New York. Next week if possible. We'll fly you both out, of course. First class. We need to move quickly on this. Victoria was standing right beside me now, her face confused. What's happening? She whispered. I looked at Ethan. He was watching me calmly, his journal closed now. Can I call you back in 10 minutes? I asked Jennifer. Of course. But please don't wait too long. We're very serious about this project. I hung up. Who was that? Victoria demanded. A publisher. A publisher? For what? For Ethan's book. The color drained from Victoria's face. What book? The one he's been writing. The one you called fantasy nonsense. He wrote a book? Apparently a very good one. Mom and Dad had appeared in the doorway now, along with Marcus and James. What's going on? Dad asked. Victoria grabbed my phone. I let her. She scrolled through the messages, her eyes widening with each line. $2 million, she read aloud. 3-book contract. Film interest. She looked up at me. This is a joke. It's not. It has to be. He's 12. He can't. She stopped. Can't what? I asked quietly. Can't read. The room was completely silent now. Ethan, I said, still looking at Victoria. Would you mind reading your opening paragraph for everyone? He opened his journal to a marked page and began to read. His voice was clear, confident. Nothing like the quiet boy who'd asked to be excused from dinner. The city of Ashenmore existed in the space between breath and shadow, where memory became solid and time ran backward through the streets like water finding its level. Kira had walked these streets for 13 years, though she'd only been alive for 12, and she understood that paradox the way most children understood hunger or cold, as a fundamental truth that required no explanation. He stopped reading. The silence stretched. Victoria's hand shook as she set down my phone. He wrote that? He's written 400 pages like that, I said. Maybe you'd like to tell him again how he can't read at grade level? I didn't know, Victoria whispered. You didn't ask. You assumed. Mom moved forward, her eyes bright with tears. Ethan, sweetheart, why didn't you tell us? Ethan shrugged. You were all so sure I couldn't do things. I figured I'd show you instead of telling you. My phone rang again. A different New York number. Answer it, Victoria said, her voice hollow. I did. This is David Morrison from the Times, a man's voice said. We're running a story on young debut authors and Milestone Publishing mentioned Ethan's contract. We'd love to include him in next Sunday's feature. Would you and Ethan be available for an interview this week? I looked around the room at my family's shocked faces. We'll need to check our schedule, I said. Can I call you back? Absolutely. We're running the story regardless, but we'd love Ethan's voice in it. I hung up and sat down next to my son. The New York Times wants to interview you, I told him. He nodded like this was perfectly normal. Should I wear the blue shirt or the gray one? I started laughing. I couldn't help it. Ethan smiled and then he was laughing too. Victoria sank into a chair. $2 million. For the first 3 books, I said. Jennifer mentioned film studios. That'll be separate. Film studios, Victoria repeated faintly. Marcus cleared his throat. I think we may have misjudged the situation. You think? I looked at him. Dad sat down heavily on the couch. A 3-book contract. At 12 years old. With film interest, James added, still looking stunned. Mom came over and hugged Ethan tightly. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. So incredibly proud. Ethan hugged her back, but over her shoulder I saw him looking at Victoria. I can read just fine, he said quietly. I just read different things than you expected. Victoria's perfect composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she whispered. Ethan, I'm so sorry. It's okay, he said, and I could hear that he meant it. Most people don't understand until they see the proof. My phone buzzed with another message. Then another. By the time the evening ended, we'd heard from 2 more publishers making counteroffers, 3 journalists wanting interviews, and an agent who represented major film writers asking if Ethan had representation. Victoria left early, her diamond bracelet suddenly seeming very small and very dim. The next morning, Ethan and I sat at our kitchen table with our laptops, reviewing contracts and scheduling calls. His journal lay beside him, filled with the words that had changed everything. Mom? He said, looking up from an email. Yes. Can I still go to school tomorrow? I don't want to miss math class. I smiled. Of course you can. Good. He went back to typing. Mr. Peterson is teaching quadratic equations. I need those for the 3rd book. My son, who couldn't read at grade level according to standardized tests, was planning the mathematics for his next novel while fielding calls from New York publishers. Sometimes the world gets it wrong. And sometimes, if you're patient enough and brave enough, you get to prove exactly how wrong they were. Ethan's first book hit shelves 6 months later. It debuted at number 1 on every major bestseller list. The principal called to apologize. Victoria sent flowers. The family group chat exploded with congratulations and requests for signed copies. But my favorite moment came 2 weeks after publication, when Ethan came home from school with a note from his reading teacher. What does it say? I asked. He handed it to me, smiling. Dear Ethan, I understand now why the standardized tests didn't capture your abilities. I've never had a student teach me so much about what reading really means. Would you consider leading a creative writing workshop for your classmates? I looked at my son, the boy they'd said couldn't read, the author with a 3-book deal and film studios competing for rights to his story. Well, I asked. Are you going to do it? He picked up his journal, that constant companion, and smiled. Of course, he said. Everyone deserves to find their own way to read the world. And he opened his journal and started writing again, proving with every word that sometimes the quietest voices tell the loudest stories.